Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the property design and development podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host and unofficial mediator, here with my colleague, official agitator, friend, and Yoda of most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Adam Muggleton. Say hello, Sir Yoda.
Hello. So this is an interesting one for me, almost emotional one for me. I've got a lot to say about this. We're going to be talking about business, the business side of our business, and the person we're interviewing today, Andy Britnell. I've known him since the early 80s, so obviously we haven't changed. We're both young still. But yeah, I've got a lot to say on this one. This could be an interesting one.
Yeah, so Andy's formal education was in heating and ventilation, and but his encore came shortly after, where he started the Commtech group, which he sold in 2003. From there, he continued his business career, owning, managing, and directing many different companies. Today, you're the regional director at Core Emirates in the UAE, where you're contributing to their rapidly expanding business operations in the Middle East. And you're also the director of Plan B Technical Solutions in the UK, where you guys are providing business service validation and inspection services. But you also specialize in the energy auditing and dilapidation reporting and litigation support. That's always a fun one. So welcome to the show, Andy Britnell. Andy, when I was doing your background check, I keep thinking to myself, if there was ever a story of someone's education as a launching pad into not one orbit, but several orbits, yours would be the story. And I'm as interested as our audience is in your story. So do tell.
Wow. I'd left school with pretty limited qualification, to be honest. But my passion was drawing, actually. I wanted to be a cartographer of all things when I first left school. But I ended up being a technical draftsman for drawing pipes and ducts, and worked for a company called Fisher Moore back in the day, which was Stuart Fisher and Philip Moore back in the 70s, late 70s. And I met, through circumstance, I met a guy called Roger Clark, and we were sitting outside a pub in South London saying, we're doing a great job here, we're really enjoying what we're doing, but we're making all this money for Phil and Stuart. I reckon we could do it ourselves. We're commissioning guys, we're technical. So commissioning, technical, Commtech, there you go. And we put it on a beer mat outside a pub in 1980, and Commtech was formed. And I can remember year one, we turned over £112,000 in 1980.
Wow.
Actually, that was a lot more money than you think in 1980. Right?
To be fair, it was a pretty sort of racing start, if you like. And back in the day then, it was very much tap work. It was, balancing and pipes and ducts again. And it was just Roger and I in the early days. Roger actually at the time was working in Saudi and paying me a salary from a decent, because it was a hardship posting, very much so in those days. So he was sending me money back so I could still feed myself. We didn't take a lot out of the business. And then early 80s, we stumbled across a guy called Johan Schoblom, who was actually also in Saudi, and I'd met Roger out there, didn't know him before that. And the three of us ended up in this sort of unusual, I would argue, three-way partnership, and it was very much a third. And we all had very complementary skills. I was probably more the businessman by then. Roger was very much the technical guy, and Johan could sell. And those three complementary skills took us on an interesting journey, really. As Robert says, back up to sort of 2003 when we sold to FTSE 250 PLC.
Yeah, I mean, that is quite the journey. So the reason, just to set the table a little bit more, recently in the UK, one of the largest MEP contractors went bust, called Michael J. Lonsdale. I did a lot of consulting work in the early aughts at Deutsche Bank, and Michael J. Lonsdale are one of the few MEP contractors I really respected. They were great at their job. They were like good contractors. They knew how to make money, but they also knew how to deliver. A very unusual combination in an M&E contractor.
Great.
And the fact that they went down when that was a really good business and they went down shocked me, absolutely shocked me. And the question is why? What is the difference between a successful firm and an unsuccessful firm? Yeah, how do firms make money, right? So being good at your job technically isn't enough. You have to be a good business person and a good salesperson. So that made me think about successful firms, and it's a very short list of successful firms. And Commtech is one of them firms. That's why I wanted to talk about the real story here. And Andy's back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened there. I'm sorry. I've got a pretty good connection here. I don't normally have too many issues, but anyway, yes, I'm back. Sorry. So you were talking about MJ Long.
Yeah. So we can edit around this. But yeah, so MJ Lonsdale going broke sort of shocked me because they're a good firm. Good firms that are good at delivery should not go broke and they should make money. And then it made me think about which firms are actually doing really well and have done well. And Commtech is one of the standout firms I always respected because it started off as a 2-3 person startup and it exited as a big business and was sold to a proper big, public listed company. That is a journey that not many people go on. So I really want to sort of dig into the hows and the whys about that. And, some of the good decisions, in business, we all make decisions. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't, but there is still an element of ability in that, right? Luck plays a part in everyone's business.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah.
But there's still an ability there to recognize luck and seize it. So let's go back to the founding of Commtech. So it was 3 of you. Now, there's something to take away there, right? Everybody had a different strength: business acumen, sales, technical, right? That, I think, is one of the foundations of the success of Commtech. How did all 3 of you guys work together? How was that as a dynamic?
It was very very open book, to be honest with you, and I think we sort of morphed into our respective roles within the business, not by design. It was more by luck, if you like. And I think the other thing, I remember talking to our bankers at the time, and I remember talking to other business people at the time, and they said, "Oh no, 3-way partnership never going to work. Someone's going to fall out. It's all going to go horribly wrong." And particularly the bank, they were quite sort of anti the prospect of 3 guys being equal shareholders. They wanted a leader, and we didn't really have that. But the byproduct of that was because none of us were particularly pernickety, to be fair. So we didn't sort of pick on the other guy and say, "Well, he's not pulling his weight." And I've always had this theory in business that things go wrong when you're doing badly because it's someone else's fault. When you're doing really well, I'm the one who's made it all. And when you're stumbling along in the middle is when it carries on doing what it does best, which is doing business. And I think, so none of us were greedy. None of us were egotistical in a way. You could argue, again, we were different characters. Roger's, Roger anyway. Adam, he's a very sort of behind the ball sort of guy. He's very quiet and unassuming until he gets passionate about his technical side of things.
Yeah.
So again, those roles really formed by just osmosis. It was a funny old thing. I think where we took the business onwards and upwards was we recognised that if we had all our eggs in one basket and we were a one-trick pony, it was always risky. So we evolved from a tab business to then, obviously, by then commissioning authority, commission management roles were becoming more to the fore. So we clearly saw an opportunity there. And I think what we then did, and again, it's corny, cliched stuff. I think what we then did was we surrounded ourselves with really good people. And we created what we liked by then, which was a multi-platform business. So we had the tab work, we had the commissioning authority, we had an FM division, we had actually a small pipework fridge business as well. We had a suspended ceiling interior business. And what that gave us was critical mass, because not all of those businesses would ever be firing well at any given time. But out of the 5 platforms that we'd effectively created, 3 would be good and 2 would be having a hard time. But the 3 supported the 2. And then the other 2 would come up and one of those would go down. So that gave us that nice, even operational platform to continue to make money, really. And also it also gave us a different skill sets. And it was interesting. We didn't believe that having an interior fit out business we had then had anything to do with commissioning.
So did you guys start with a business plan? Like, did you, like, you come together, right? You form the band. It's like the story of the Eagles or something, right? You form the band. Did you have this vision of growing it to a big business, or were you just in the business of surviving?
I think we started surviving. And I think, again, what Roger and I, particularly when we very first sat down, because we were both in a business that was actually doing okay, it was doing pretty well. And it was a very early doors commissioning company. The chaps that owned it at the time were actually oil and gas guys. So they brought a certain skill set to them.
Yeah.
But we didn't always like, and I'm not telling tales out of school, we didn't always like the way they did things. And they were very avaricious, and it wasn't about the delivery, it was more about how much we're going to make on that. And whereas Roger and I had a much more philosophical view, we took the view early doors that let's do a good job, let's be professional and capable of what we're doing, and that will, the byproduct of that is ultimately we'll make a bit of money. But that wasn't our driving force at the time. Our driving force was to do a good job. So I think from the early days of Commtech, we took out of the previous business everything that wasn't right and didn't bring it to the new business. We just went out to do a good job. And that's my ethos still to this day, actually. And we're going back a long time.
Yeah. For our listeners, there's some really key lessons in there. One of them is a lot of businesses start at the pub.
yeah. It was the third point, actually.
Yeah, those opportunities come from wherever, and you have to be aware of them. So that's one of them. And the second thing is that recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and surrounding yourself with people who can fill in those shortcomings. Definitely. And the third thing is that the money is the reward for doing things right. If you go in strictly, every business is there to generate value for the shareholders. Otherwise you don't have a business. But that money comes from doing everything else right. And 3 key lessons there in less than a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that's one great takeaway. What you did there, what I heard is you differentiated your business by doing good work and making that speak for itself, and then the emergent property from that would be money, rather than being money first, right?
I think as well as part of that ethos and philosophy was we were actually quite selective on who we would work for, because when you're a startup, it's very easy to go grabbing everything that comes in the door.
Yeah.
It's, again, lesson I've sort of almost a mantra that I stuck with all through my working life is it's all well and good making money on paper, but if you ain't banking it, then it's not worth it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at the margin I've made on that. Yeah, but they haven't paid us. Yeah, but look at the margin. Yeah, but we haven't had the money, and we might not get that money, and then we didn't get that money. Yeah. So the margins it's irrelevant at that point in time.
Yeah. So you always got to be careful. You always have to be careful the people who call you their partners.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's the first warning shot. Like, right? I remember going into a business meeting that lasted less than 30 seconds. My brother, who was our financial guy at the time, we walked into a distributor. They actually called us in for a meeting. They wanted to take on one of our lines, and they proceeded to threaten us. If you don't give us exclusivity on this particular line, we're not going to buy any of your lines. We hadn't even been introduced yet. Like, there was no handshaking, nothing. And I looked at Doug, and Doug looked at me, and we walked out.
Yeah. We had a situation relatively recently, actually, but it's a sort of an acid test of a lot of things we've done. We went into a post-tender meeting or a mid-tender meeting, and the guy said, right, I've been through your schedule and I've been through your labour histogram, and I reckon I can knock 40% off of that. And we said, okay, well, you haven't read the same spec that we did. On that basis, thank you very much. We're out there. And he said, where are you going? He said, well, we're not going to knock 40% off our job, so we're going.
Yeah.
And we didn't get the job, funny enough, but we were happy not to.
Yeah.
Nope. Do you know what? That's another great takeaway. The ability to say no in the right place is a superpower.
It is.
Absolute superpower.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that sense the desperateness, that apparent desperateness is probably the best way. And misreading that is never good.
Well, and it's always it is a compromise, or you're always, it's an ever moving sort of mindset, because, if there's no mixed metaphor, because, you know, we are a resource type of business, we're a service organization, so it's really about people. And obviously keeping the numbers optimally operational is really where it's at, because if you've got people sitting in the office twiddling their thumbs, they're costing you big money. So keeping them optimally used is really key, but that you must sort of also compromise that with not taking anything on through the door just to get these people employed. It's like a race to the bottom on the rates, which we've all experienced many times over the years. And you just, Adam used the word, knowing when to say no. It's really important.
Also, what we're talking about here is, and sort of, I think you three guys sort of accidentally set this up, and some of the best things do happen accidentally.
Nice way of putting it.
Yeah, you shouldn't. My dad used to say to me, never confuse a genius with good luck. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But one of the things I talk about when I'm coaching people where I am now is, you know, I ask them, what's the difference between the CEO and the COO? I get all sorts of funny answers to that. But for me, it's this. The CEO is a leader. He's almost a salesman. So like that was sort of yourself and Johan sort of fell into that group, right?
Yeah, we were pretty good self-promoters.
Yeah, you need the COO as well. It's the optimization. That person's job is to optimize the absolute what's is out of the business, wring all the waste out, get everything working smoothly, optimize everything. You know, that is as important as the other. You know, you can get the job in, you still got to deliver it, right? So those are the yin and yang that you have to have in the right proportions.
And it's never, there's no silver bullet to it. There's no easy solution. It's always changing daily. Even now, even in the Middle East with Core Emirates, you know, we grapple with keeping that optimum operational level, and it will never be fixed. It will never be optimal. It never is. But all you can do is make the most of it and make the best of it.
The other thing I think that sort of worked out great for Commtech was Johan. In a way, I know Johan the least out of all three. I only met him 3 or 4 times. But what I think he really brought was the sales. Engineering firms are typically horrible at sales, right? It's almost like a dirty word if you're a consultant, right? You know?
Agreed, yeah.
And, you know, that ability is one of the most underrated ability in the C-suite, I think, ever. And, you know, that's another takeaway, right? You do need that component in someone at the top table.
You do, yeah. And again, back to the sad demise of MJL, you could argue that, you know, that the 2 key guys within that organisation were both inherent salesmen, in fact. And you know, and I don't know the story. I don't know what the straw broke their camel's back. But you can only assume that maybe, you know, we had the COVID era, so that probably decimated their revenue. Yeah. And they were perhaps taking on work that they wouldn't ordinarily have taken on with people they wouldn't ordinarily have worked with. And it's easy, it's great tempting to do that. And I fully understand why they might have done that. But it can end in tears, as it did in their case.
Absolutely. So, the other thing with Commtech was, so you start 3 men in a pub. So 3 men walk into a pub. It's like start of a joke.
That's the punchline.
There was an Englishman and a Swede. But
it's sort of like an accidental supergroup is formed. It's like the Travelling Wilburys almost, right?
Yeah.
But again, old boomer reference. Sorry about that, guys. But you know, so you start this business, it starts to work, right? When did it sort of, so I always remember I've started a few businesses, and you start off first and it's all, everyone's in the trench and it's all a bit like, you know, kill or be killed. Then all of a sudden you wake up one day and it's quite formal and it's like a
Yes.
real business. So when was that transition for you? How many years into that?
Question.
I reckon that was 10 years in. I mean, it was
Right.
probably, we started 1980, so early 90s really when we suddenly realized we had to be proper grown-ups and not just play about with this thing. It was starting to get a bit serious, you know. And we had by then, I can remember sitting in the office in South London there, looking out the window, and you know, we had a car park full of cars, and you'd look out of my office, and there was offices full of people, and I had a sort of an epiphany where I thought, my God, I'm helping all these people pay their mortgages and feed their families, and that's a bit scary, really. That's a bit sobering, and it really was. You suddenly have a feeling of enormous responsibility. But in a way, that sort of pushes you on as well, because you just want to keep doing that. And I, you know, something I said earlier, what I think we unusually did was we brought people into the business and said, there you go, that's your division. You've got the skill sets. Give us a monthly report and let me know how it's going. That sounds a bit sort of trite, but we did speak to them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We had regular meetings, and we did get really quite formalised. I mean, Roger, I, and Johan, because I keep coming back to these sort of platform businesses, the head of each platform, we would meet once a week in rotation for a breakfast meeting. So
Right.
me, Roger, Johan will meet the head of the commissioning hands-on team, the head of the commissioning management team, the head of the FM team, and that sort of just kept the juices of communication flowing. But what we didn't do was keep on and saying, what are you doing there? Why are you doing that? What's happening there? We let them get on with it. And
Yeah.
I would argue a couple of those guys, as is evidenced by what's happened subsequently, were much better people, much more talented at doing what we were doing than me, Roger or Johan were, honestly. They were good guys, and they proved to be good guys.
Yeah. Well, that was one of Tom Peters' philosophies. You know, you hire the right people, then get the hell out of the way and let them. I mean, you hired them for a reason, right?
Exactly,
You know, you think about it. He also spent a lot of time talking about, you know, if you hire people below your own ethos, less passionate, less driven, less smart, well, then you're just setting up a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
You need to find those people who are better than you, smarter than you. And if you've got any kind of an ego, that's a hard thing to do, right? Because
yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you look at the successful businesses like you guys had, it's about humility. Adam, we were talking about that earlier. You know, humility and recognizing your brilliance is yeah, okay, good for you. Your mom and dad are proud of you, but
Who cares?
that is what's going to cut it.
Yeah, pay the mortgage.
There's a real takeaway there, right? Again, I remember when I woke up, thought one day, oh, really? I'm actually grown up now. It's a bit of a sobering thought, right? I knew, because everybody, particularly when you're in business, has that moment. But again, accidentally or not, it doesn't matter whether it's an accident or intentional. You were clever enough to get out of your own way. Because one of my true tests of a leader and a successful business is, but certainly of a leader, is can you hire someone who's better than you objectively at every level and still motivate them and lead them, right? Somehow, I know you had some strong personalities there, like someone like Kevin Deneen, for example, right?
Yeah, for
Much
sure.
stronger than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, somehow that works, right? So hook by crook, it doesn't matter. There's a takeaway there for everybody, right? To have a successful business that can scale, you have to be able to get out of your own way and make it not about you, right? And in commissioning, certainly in commissioning in the UK, that is something that's really hard to do.
You're back.
Yeah, you're back. Yes, all right. I know we sort of apologise to some of the listeners here. We've got a few internet issues, but there's some gold coming out here, right? So this is another lesson. Get out of the way and hire people and let them do their job.
And I think the other legacy, if you like, if I'm not sort of getting ahead of myself here, is that the fact is that it, you know, from 1980 to today is a long time. Yet I'm still very, very best buddies with Roger. I'm still very best buddies with Johan. Still very best buddies with Kevin Deneen, Mark Mitchell. We've stayed friends and we've stayed connected through the industry, but connected through a shared passion, if you like. we all enjoyed what we did with Commtech. You know,
Yeah.
some of us enjoyed it financially, for sure. All of us enjoyed it financially, to be fair, but some more than others. But what we did was we had a good time. We had a lot of fun on the way. We really, really did.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that is a mutual respect thing as well, right? I mean, a lot of the people, one of the measures of a good firm is when that firm breaks up or gets sold, what happens to the senior people? And in Commtech's case, all the senior people went on to big things, right?
Yeah.
So can't argue with that. So there's another lesson. Now, what was unusual about Commtech from my point of view, as I was a rival during a lot of that, was you were winning so much it used to drive me freaking nuts, quite frankly. So how would you distill down the magic in the sales and marketing of Commtech? Because you were the first commissioning firm that I would say had a real brand.
Yeah, I think we fairly early in the journey, we recognized that we could punch above our weight with profile. You know, nowadays it would all be social media, so on and so forth. Back in the day, when I'm talking about in sort of through the 80s into the early 90s, it was all about the trade magazines. It was all about even the national press. And you'll remember, Adam, we got ourselves in the press a lot. So, you know, not necessarily through the business related activities.
Yeah.
As you know, I raced cars, and that was always high profile part of our sort of business promotion.
Yeah.
And by the way, it was enormously successful. I would speak to people on a Monday morning, our clients, and the first question they would ask me was, "How did the weekend go?"
Yeah.
And so you engendered such a good, strong relationship with these people that then the sort of business side of it was sort of easier, really, because they really were. It's a fine line, because you obviously don't want to also be seen to being, oh God, I'm spending far too much money with this guy. I can afford to go racing cars, you know. So there's that camp, but there's the other camp that just loved the fact that, and we did a lot of business to business on the back of the motorsport. It was a break talking point. It was a subject matter, and yeah, it was effective. It worked for us.
So just
and I think,
as an
sorry,
experiment, so when I knew Andy as a young man, he was a glamorous racing car driver on top of running a successful business.
I don't know about the glamorous bit, but
so that again, Commtech broke ground as being a brand. It was the first.
Yeah, we worked hard at that. To be fair,
commissioning firm I was aware of
didn't just happen.
that did that. So
it was a conscious effort to, and you know, again, without moving on to the sort of end of the story, if you like, or the next stage of the story.
Yeah.
What it did, as I say, it allowed us to punch above our weight. It made us, and we then formed this sort of quasi group, and it was the Commtech Group PLC, and we played all the sort of commercial games. We weren't really a PLC because Rod and I owned the shares, you know, but we could be a PLC because of the share capital and all those sort of things. So we just made this thing look so sort of spectacularly bigger than it really was, and it wasn't a tiny business by then, but it wasn't as big as the marketplace perhaps perceived. So as a consequence, when we sold, we weren't putting ourselves up for sale. We got a knock on the door. So we didn't make a conscious effort, we're going to sell this business. Someone knocked on the door and said, we want to buy your business. And our first reaction was, well, that's very flattering, but we're for sale, see you. And they wouldn't go away. They just wouldn't go away.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you struggling with paperwork, spreadsheet overload, and project management? Then Blue Rhythm is the solution to help you. Streamline your commissioning and project management process. Go paperless. Increase efficiency, and save money. Blue Rhythm is commissioning and project management software by practitioners for practitioners, adapting to your workflows and processes, and doing things your way. Blue Rhythm provides painless and fast onboarding by bringing your existing workflows, forms, checklists, and issues logs into Blue Rhythm for you. You can use their pre-built templates to customize your commissioning workflows, and Blue Rhythm can fully handle the transition from your current software platform. Blue Rhythm is secure, scalable, and reliable, backed by amazing support, and accessible 24/7 on any Windows, iOS, or Android device. Why are you still using paper and hard to control spreadsheets? Start your free Blue Rhythm account today at bluerhythm.com.
And now, back to the show.
I want to talk about that. So most firms in the engineering, construction, consulting sector are bought, not sold. What I mean by that is the trick to business. So anyone who's in a business right now, whatever story you're telling yourself, believe me, the only purpose of a business is to make money for its shareholders, right? End, period. What you do, how you make that money is what's going on, right? But the job is to make money. And a lot of people, certainly in the engineering consulting field, attach their identity to their job, which normally means their businesses are bought, not sold. You sell a business at the peak, but a business is bought from you when you're on the floor, right? So Commtech, again, was the first business I saw that I could relate to in the sort of small SME space in property that was sold, not bought, right? And what I mean by that is you got out at the top. So one of the questions I was going to ask you was, when did you sit back with your, your steeple hands going, I think we should sell this business? But it sounds like you were just approached, right?
Yeah, we were, and there's a sort of slightly skewed exit mindset because Roger, to his credit or discredit, he's 8 years older than I am. I'm not a young guy anymore. But at the time, I don't think I was probably in my 50s, early 50s. Roger was late 50s, and it's actually, again, benefit of hindsight, quite young to sell a business, really, as an exit strategy. I think there was two factors to it. One, we borderline created our own monster because by the time we were approached, we were a substantial business, 150 staff, 100 cars and vans on the road, all the infrastructure that went with that, and it was a eye-watering experience on a daily basis. And although we'd created by then, or from the outset really, but we'd become quite formalised for our owner-managed business. We'd become quite professional. We approached the business side of the business, if this makes any sense, the same way as we approached the engineering side of the business. Let's do this right, and weren't just written on paper. All of those things. So, I've lost my train now. Where I was going with that? I get quite excited about it all because it was a great. So I think your question was, when did we think this is it, Rob, this time next year? It was probably in the early 2000s. So although we weren't ostensibly putting ourselves up for sale, it was always sort of something niggling away. The thing, we created a great business here. Maybe there could be a nice exit journey here. And as I say, we got a knock on the door, which we rebuffed several times actually, and then we I think got convinced that it was probably the right thing for the next stage of the business, because we reached our ceiling height in a way in terms of our skill sets and funding of that, and growth goals, cash, and all those things. So although we'd grown year on year on year, I don't think we ever had a negative year from 1980 to 2003 when we sold. Every single year grew, and with that comes its challenges. And I think we probably looked to, by then the PLC had come in and sort of done a bit of wooing and hooing and said, well, yeah, but if you don't need to worry about the bank, because if you need a bit of cash on Monday to pay the wages on Friday, you just pick up the phone and you get it, and all those sort of things. And we thought, right, this sounds pretty good. I quite like the sound of that. So that's what we did. The offer by then was right. Really, we went back and said, look, we haven't groomed this business for sale. We don't necessarily want to sell this business, but if we are going to sell the business, there's a figure. And they went, yeah, all right then.
Well, oftentimes in a business sale, the key shareholders, in order to retain the goodwill in the business, are required to stick around for a couple of years. Was that the case with you?
Yes, when we sold in the February of 2003, we actually by then had as is often the case with these things, there was an earn-out requirement. And again, because although I'm can be quite firm. And I said, the only way we will accept an element of the money being on an earnout is, yes, you now own the business, but you leave us alone to make that earnout. Because if you start coming in and messing with the business, you're impacting upon our ability to do that. So they left us alone. To their credit, they absolutely left us alone for the first year. We made our earnout, which again, a bit like three-way partnerships, bankers don't believe they're going to work. Everyone said to me, you'll never make your earnout, of course. And we did. Then they started to take interest. And again, I'd sort of be a little bit guarded in what I say, but I think by then it was pretty clear that they didn't really quite understand what they bought, because they were a manufacturing background business. Service was a bit tricky to them. I don't think they recognized the biggest faux pas for me. They didn't realize they'd acquired the people. They thought they'd acquired a business. They hadn't. They'd acquired those people that I talked about earlier that were, skillful and better than me and all those things. And they didn't treat those people the way they should have done. So as a consequence, it started to go the wrong way pretty quickly, to be honest with you. For me personally, I found the transition from an owner-manager business, which, as I said to earlier, was very well structured by then. We were very formal. We had all the right minutes in place. We did it, to my mind, by the book, if you like. But then being exposed to a different regime where you did have absolute city shareholders to satisfy, and budgets and forecasts and everything that went with it, and I struggled with it. It wasn't a bit of me, so I lasted, I think, 8 months and left.
Yeah, Andy, your story is almost a mirror of my own story. Adam, you know it, and I sold my business to a large Danish company. You would actually recognize the brand name, and well, the short story is they drove it into the ground. We bought it back and then sold it again. But you're right, and as the owner of the business, how important people are. They're everything.
Absolutely.
And we spent a long time hiring people. Like sometimes in fact, our business grew based on the people we hired, and we recognized that sometimes to get the right person, it would take time. Like sometimes it took us a year and a half to get the right individual into our organization. And it meant actually negotiating with that person's employer, saying, listen, if that individual becomes unhappy, there's an indication that they're going to leave, then come talk to us, because we have a position for him, but we don't want to poach him. That's not good business practice. So for several of our people that we brought on board, they came along only after they were unhappy with where they were, and we gave them that opportunity. Well, and you're right. When the collapse of businesses often happen, and Adam, you've seen this many, many times as well, happens when the purchasers don't really understand what they're buying.
Absolutely.
And it's the culture, and you see it, and particularly when companies get big, where they'll have a change in the leadership organization, and that change has no attachment to the culture of the business. The history.
Culture is everything. Absolutely everything.
Yep. And that becomes disheartening for the people that grew up in the business. Yeah. You've just told a story that has happened over and over again. And again, for those that are listening, that's one of the risks you have to take. And
sorry, Rob, just as a slight tangent to what you said there about hiring the right people and what you do. What we have always done, and again, the sort of ethos has carried all the way through. If we stumbled across someone who we thought was outstanding, we would take them on even if we had no work for them.
Yeah.
Because good people you find work for.
Yeah.
So we definitely recruited people when we had no revenue stream for them, but because they were such good people, we weren't prepared to miss them.
Yeah. That's a brilliant strategy.
Right? I like that. That's a good strategy. But what fascinates me about the exit, so I've been lucky enough to have several exits, and some good, some bad, some awesome, right? So there's two parts to a deal. There's the money that goes in your trousers at close. Everyone understands that. And then there's that nightmare that first year afterwards, right? Which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, we both alluded to that.
That's one of the best exit I ever had was, give me my check, I'm out of here. That was the best one ever. But, culture trumps everything. It trumps legislation, what you think is going on. It is the most important thing that no one can really define well. So culture matters. But what I'm interested in, one of the reasons, and this is my Adam's theory of life here, one of the reasons I think a lot of consulting and engineering businesses don't get sold well is because the owners' identities are tied up with their jobs. Mm. Right. So I had this in one of my businesses. I wanted to put it up for sale because, again, I'm a money whore, right? I'm clear with that. And some of my partners, their identities were so tied up with it, they couldn't get past what happens when I'm sold. Who am I?
Yeah.
Because their identity was, I'm an engineer and I own this business. So for them, it was a job. For me, it was just a business, and that I see that so much now. I've experienced that firsthand. I see that everywhere. You guys didn't suffer from that?
Yes, we did. Yeah, it'd be just foolish to say we didn't. Yeah, we did. But it was very much, even to this day. I mean, and it's been 20 years since I sold it. Even to this day, I still have a little sort of little tear in the eye when I think of its demise, if you like, after we sold it. That saddens me. When businesses get sold, if they don't culturally mix, I think something like only 10% of acquisitions succeed. It's the statistics are astonishing. And we were a case in point. We didn't succeed. What we did do in the journey through our period, though, was we did buy and sell businesses as part of our growth. So it wasn't just organic, there was some acquisitions. And we made sure that the culture fitted, and then it worked.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I was going to put a drink.
No worries. So, that again, from me looking on the outside, and also I know you guys, I was really impressed with the exit. It was really interesting and sad for me, actually, watching it go down. Because, my thought takeaway was 2 years post sale was, holy crap, they were at the top of that game, and 2 or 3 years later, it's not.
And it was as simple as just not acknowledging the new owner, not acknowledging the key people needed to be treated as key people.
Yeah.
And not just a commodity.
So that's another takeaway, right? There is,
as you know, Adam, sorry, the key people I'm talking about, they then subsequently left and set up their own entity, and look how well that's done.
Yeah, and they've done great.
Most of them good guys. Yeah.
A key takeaway here is, whatever you might think about your boss and the leadership in the firm you're in, the ability for those people to manage the culture and the people in the business is everything, right? Absolutely everything. Because if you get the wrong leader, it just goes down so fast you don't even see it.
Yeah, it sure does. It really does. Yeah.
Well, within 6 to 9 months, you can pretty much see where it's headed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, my one of my little anecdotal stories really was we were asked to produce a budget the following year, so I produced a budget and a forecast. And my then, if you like, line manager, which I wasn't used to because I'd always been my own boss, said, "Well, that's not good enough. So you need to make those numbers bigger." And I said, "Well, I can make them what you like, but you've asked me what we can deliver. We can deliver that. If you want me to produce the numbers that say that, then don't come in a year's time saying you failed to make your targets, because we won't." And sure enough, a year later, he came back and said, "Well, you haven't made the targets." I said, "I know, I told you. Here's the email where I said, we won't make them."
Yep.
But of course, in the interim, what's happened is, and then I'll probably get a bit too controversial, if you like, what's happened in the interim, they've used those numbers to produce a report up to the city, and the share price has gone up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the news can move the share price.
hot air and cold air, of course.
Yeah. Let's just talk about legacy a little bit. So, it was, kudos on the exit, but it was a little bit sad to see things sort of flop down pretty quick. But how many offshoots are there of Commtech? If I were going back in time, I would say to you, for God's sake, trademark that name and logo.
Well, it's funny you say that, but before we came on air, I looked at there are several, and there are several still in existence. You've got Andres in Spain, you've got a guy called Ian Woodruff in Europe. you had two Commtechs in Dubai, one Commtech Asia and Commtech Middle East, I think. One of which was a sort of a direct Vine equivalent of the originals. But well, again, the acquirers of our business allowed that to happen. I wouldn't have allowed that to happen. Interesting, as a little aside, when we sold the Commtech group, at the time, if you remember, we obviously had businesses in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
They didn't buy Asia. That was a separately ring-fenced entity, and they weren't interested. Much to my shock and astonishment, they didn't want to buy Commtech Asia. So we subsequently sold that to ISG.
Yeah.
Which has then morphed into Commtech Asia in Middle East, which didn't really work, and is now a company called Sigma. And again, little anecdotal story here. In 1982, we took on a guy called Andy Britnell straight from school as a student, and we put him through the training courses. And he turned out to be a superstar. And then in 1992, when he was in his late 20s, he had an unfortunate relationship breakup, and he said, "I'm going to go and sow me wild oats. I'm off to Singapore." And we said, "Well, if you're going to go to Singapore, I've got a couple of contacts out there. Why don't you go and work for us?" Back to my maxim about good people. So he went out to Asia in 1992 and set up Commtech Asia, and he's still there now. He still lives in Hong Kong. 30 years later.
And also, we're talking about a man here now who is the group managing director, I think, right? He has created a
chairman,
business. Yeah.
Yeah, so, fantastic.
Yeah.
Been various, again, iterations through various ownerships now, partly because ISG's changed, so he's gone on that journey with them. But he did fabulous work for us out in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And again, still buddies with him now, still talk to him regularly.
Actually, I must admit, I forgot you had the double dip. Sold the UK and sold Asia. So tip of the hat.
Well, and then the interior fit out business, which didn't, excuse the pun, fit with the acquirers, they weren't interested. So we sold it for a figure and bought it back 2 years later for a tenth of that figure.
Nice.
Nice. It subsequently did fail actually in 2010, which is when I went off on another journey, because going back to my passion for motorsport, I spent 10 years or so, 4 or 5 years or so in the motorsport world. Because someone said to me once, if you work in the industry in which you love, you'll never do a day's work in your life. What I didn't know was that motorsport is just a fine way of turning a big fortune into a small fortune.
As you become a billionaire, start as a millionaire, start as a billionaire, and go into motorsport.
Yeah, exactly. You make a small fortune, start with an art.
Boats have the same way of doing that.
I mean,
and then I went out into the Middle East, as you know, in 2015, and that was opportunist. That was purely circumstantial. I wasn't planning to, but
So there's an element of sort of going where the opportunities are. I've sort of done that a little bit, just don't question it, just move towards it and see what happens.
And again, I think you've got to follow your gut a lot of the time as well. And again, back to the same old thing. It's about people. I went out when I went out in January 2015 to Dubai, and I walked into the office there, and just as an employee. And the first guy I bumped into used to work for Commtech in the Manchester office in the late 80s, early 90s. And he said, "No, what are you doing? Like you the same." And as it turns out, we've then formed a good relationship. We've now bought the business back, so we are the owners of it now, which we weren't. We were both employees. We're the owners, and so I'm doing it all again, really. And I should know better at my age.
I was going to say, I must admit, I've decided sort of I'm only going to be in businesses that don't require RFPs. I'm happy to be an employee now where I am, because I'm at that stage in my life. Yeah. But kudos to going back in there. But to sort of bring this story into a loop, what we're saying here is, it's possible for 3 people to meet in a pub, have an idea, start a business, form that business into a big business and sell it. But what is the magic formula there? And the magic formula is, apart from luck, there's an element of luck, but it's being able to manage people, being able to sell, and being able to get out your own way. That is it for me, right? That if you had to put that into an algebra, that would be it.
and entrenching a culture in
Yes.
creating and managing and nurturing that culture. And our simple culture was, let's in fact, one of the things we captured was we cared.
Yeah.
We absolutely cared. We really did care. We just wanted to do a good job, and we still do.
Yeah.
We still do.
Yeah. So prioritizing quality of your business and work to generate the other benefits, right?
And you do need luck. As I say, the guy I walked into in the office in Dubai in 2015 has exactly that attitude and culture, and that's why we've got on well. And again, he's the Roger Clark of Commtech, of the Middle East operation. He's technical. He's a hybrid, actually. He's technical and he's a sales guy, so he's a bit of a young Roger in one. And I'm still the business guy. I sit in the background and count the pennies and make sure that we're not spending too much.
If the glove fits, you must do it.
And I have improved my handicap since I'm going to go out to Dubai because the golf course is.
Hey, Andy, I got to ask you a question. In the early days of your business, I got to imagine that you had very much a horizontal organizational chart. Like there was, right?
Horizontal totem pole, we were described as once.
Right. And then I have to imagine that as you grew, and then certainly when you were acquired, that all of a sudden that horizontal organizational became vertical because some MBA said you needed to have a vertical organization.
Very good observation, Robert. Spot on.
Yeah. And then that's when that all ends.
And it wasn't nothing. We weren't comfy with that. I mean, we weren't at work as collective or anything like that, but we were very flat-lined. You're right in terms of the style, and again, the staff within the organisation naturally worked that out themselves, so they knew who to come to talk to about certain subjects, and it did work. It did, and as soon as you get that, as soon as the totem pole started to go upright, it didn't work again.
Yeah.
So yeah,
things get bypassed, and you create silos as well, which is another big thing about my mindset. When we had these 5 platform businesses that I've alluded to many times, we made sure those 5 businesses all actually meshed with each other instead of just being 5 businesses. They actually, all the managers knew each other. We made sure they gelled and all of those things. Yeah.
And again, if businesses have personalities, and businesses that are humble and operate in low gear and is much different than a business that's egotistical and greedy, and it's a self-destructive mechanism. And so for those, again, listening to this podcast, this is Adam, this is a gold mine of wisdom that we're
absolutely
showing here. And you're talking, people that are listening, you're listening to 3 people that have been through this many times. And this is going to be an hour Cole's notes on how to start and run and sell and watch your businesses collapse and then buy them back again.
Yeah.
You know what? This reminds me, like when I first started as a young know-it-all person, right? You look at your boss, you think, "What's he doing? I'm doing all the work." He comes to the office, right? But when I got that job, I remember thinking, "Holy crap, this is so much harder than I thought it would be," right? Because you've got to it's a dichotomy of trying to stay horizontal, but you still need structure. You got to make money, but you got to deliver. There's all these dichotomies you're trying to balance out, right? And that's the difficult thing. And engineers typically, or technical people, are not great at that, to be fair.
No, they're not. No. And technical guys generally, as a business, your best salespeople are your resource.
Yes.
Technical guys actually generally can't bloody sell. They're useless. They just, I'm here to do that. Yeah, but have you talked to them about maybe we could do that for them? Well, no, I didn't think of that.
Just doing my job, mate.
Yeah, but that means the difference. That's why people are different, and you just have to recognise their skills and put the square peg in the square hole and not in the round one.
Yeah. So look, we're coming up on time now, so we normally finish with a couple of quick fire questions. I'll start. So, what is your one takeaway from the whole Commtech experience? What's the one thing you carry forward?
People and relationships. without that, you don't have a business. We and it was fortunate. We gelled as a three-way partnership. We weren't, as I said at the outset, we weren't finicky, so we didn't say, well, he's had three P's and I've only had the baked beans, so I'm not paying the third of the bill.
Yeah.
We weren't like that, and as a consequence, there wasn't any fallout. We, in the 20 odd years we were together as a three-way partnership, we really never fell out. And
that's amazing.
And that carried through, that sort of filtered through the whole business, that we were content and happy with our lot, if you like.
Yeah.
Nice.
So my question is, in business, there are places for black and white, accounting, law, the mechanics of the business, which you can hire out. But the culture of business operates in the gray.
Yes.
You have gray relationships, you got gray vendors, you got gray job sites. Talk to our listeners about the importance of recognizing the difference between black and white and gray, and how you need to embrace the gray.
I think it's nuanced, isn't it? Because you're right. You can look at it very woodenly, and when you get an RFQ come through the door, who should look at that? And there's two ways of looking at it. You can look at it from the salesman's point of view, and the salesman can always go out and win the job even if there's no margin in it. You then got to look at it commercially, and that's probably more my role than the technical guy. And then you've got to make it look sexy. So you need someone with a bit of flair and that sort of spirit. So again, it's back to my same old thing about the people. It is every pre-qualification documents are the bane of my life. Why can't, I know it's been tried, why can't someone come up with a standard pre-qual that we all adhere to? Because everyone is different. Everything asks the question in a different nuanced way. And they're just such a ball ache. They're such a load of nonsense, really. and the guys that are reading them don't know what they're reading. The guy that's created the questionnaire in the first place doesn't know what you do. 1 minute he's selling paper clips, then he's buying a commissioning authority role. It's hugely frustrating.
So true.
Yeah.
All right. So on that wise wisdom, we shall wrap up. So Andy, listen, thanks for coming on. I really want to get your story out.
I've actually enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. Actually,
that was awesome. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, brilliant.
There need to be examples out there of what's possible, and I think the Commtech story is one of the best examples of what's possible when three men meet in a pub and get drunk.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks very much.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the built environment? Do you want to learn from the industry's most inspiring, intelligent, and accomplished professionals? Then the companion to this podcast, Wisdom of the Property Crowd, is just the book for you. From Edifice Complex podcast interviews, this book distills the critical thinking, insight, and ideas of some of the property industry's most accomplished and respected practitioners. Each chapter is a synopsis of an hour-plus interview, capturing the takeaways and insights, including diagrams and images, to help explain concepts and ideas. There's also a brief bio about the interviewee and a QR code linked to the podcast episode for those that want to explore further. These are the mentors you wish you had in college. Wisdom of the Property Crowd by Adam Muggleton, available on Amazon worldwide.
And now, back to the show.
We have been talking for almost 5 years to be doing a little bit more on the business side. And Adam, I think this was an awesome discussion. There were so many gems. If my dad was a business guy, my brothers were all business guys, and it's been just part of my life. And I was fortunate enough to have those gems dumped into my gray matter early on.
Yeah.
And I remember when my dad saying that it's always easy to get into business. Getting out of business is not so much. He says, you anytime you have an entrance strategy, always go in with an exit strategy. Never start it without figuring out how you're going to get out of it. But there's a lot of people that haven't had that, and they end up in the bar.
Yeah.
Right. and so again, like for our listeners, just to go back to the beginning, he gets out of school, heating, ventilation. He likes to he wants to draft.
Yeah.
Right. and here he is now, and like a completely different world from where he started. And
Yeah.
that his story is, it's brilliant. And so many cliches on growing a business and then selling it and watching it collapse, buying it back, and
So there's so many business lessons there, but also one of the life lessons there is like, Andy started out in technical college as a draftsman, right? So how many identities has Andy had? He's been a draftsman. He's been a working draftsman, right?
Yeah.
He's been an entrepreneur. He's been a business manager and leader, racing car driver, running different, again, passes my test as a leader. He's running businesses in disciplines that are not his, right? Ultimately.
Yeah.
So there's a story, right?
Yeah.
So one of the takeaways here is, I know for anyone who's young in their career, struggling, or just gone through an engineering degree, that is not your identity. That is your qualification.
That's
You
exactly
can take
right.
that and go anywhere you want.
Yeah.
Right. So don't be, I think a trap I see a lot as I've got older and look back is people attach their identity to something and then they run with it and they try and fit everything into that identity. You can change identity. You can reinvent yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. So that's a lesson. If anyone just takes one thing away, I'd love them to take that away. But let's talk about the business lessons here, right? So that journey from like 3 people and a startup to an exit to a PLC, that's not a journey many people make.
Yeah.
The lessons of like getting out your own way, hiring the best people, delegating. There's so many good takeaways there.
Yeah. Right off the bat, you get the sense of humility. There's a calming aura about Andy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm over a lifetime of career of businesses. I mean, there's times when people get excited and times that you're really sort of questioning what you're doing. But he in the short time that we had, but you've known him a long time, but I get the sense that in times of stress, he's the kind of guy that digs deep and says, okay, look, this is the reality that we're in, and this is the way we're going to get out of it, and we're just going to keep picking at it till we get through it. And that is a strength. I know in my business career, there was lots of times I look back and go, did I really behave that way? Like that was, and I remember, and then having people around you, good people, again, we talked about that, having good people around you you have to give people the ability to tell you when you're being a dickhead.
Yes. You've got to be able to hear the word no from people below you, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I had some good people who, Brian Wielden, I don't know if he listens to the podcast. He's still out there, still alive, still doing his thing. And I remember him several times saying, like, Robert, like time for a reality check here. Everybody's just trying to do their best.
Yep.
And Dale Heath was another person that had to call me aside a couple times and say, and Dick Barnett was another one. Just, Robert.
Also, there's I don't think I've ever seen Andy angry or stressed, actually, thinking about it in all the time I've known him.
Yeah.
So he's that calm, competent leader.
Yeah.
But also another measure for me on how successful and unusual business Commtech was a lot of people that spun out of it went on to bigger, better things, right?
Yeah.
So that culture created winners, right? People who went through that business and came out the other side and went on to typically bigger and better things. That's a win. And the fact that there's so many sort of like carbon copies of it nowadays because they didn't trademark the name is another sort of testament to what an unusually successful business at a moment in time it was, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to get out at the top, that is something that is so unusual.
Yeah. And those are tough decisions. There's no doubt. I mean, when we sold our business, it wasn't because we were like Andy, we weren't looking to sell. Someone wanted to buy us. And there were consequences had we not sold it. And so going back to the beginning of the discussion about not having a one-trick pony, we quickly found our business growing rapidly, and there was a dominant thread within that business. And that's actually what made the business attractive. But we failed to develop, not that, I have to be careful here, because it's not that the whole business wasn't growing. All of our areas were growing, except for one was growing faster than the other.
Right. And
it became a thoroughbred race where the lead horse was so far out in front, and that's where people were putting their money on it. And that's ultimately what was bought. And had we not sold that horse, we would have left with the other companies, but our infrastructure was based on the collective.
Yeah.
And so it was a tough decision to sell the business. Do I regret it? No, like Andy and like yourself, when you have a good exit.
There's nothing better than a good exit, mate. But you can't look back, right?
Yeah.
I sometimes she'll get a little bit wistful for, I wish what could have been, right? But you can't live like that.
Yeah.
Let's say that was a moment in time and I'm moving on. But the other thing that really came out for me was, to talk about culture. I've been I always say this when I'm sort of advising owners in firms, culture trumps everything.
Yeah.
You think you're in control, you're not. The culture trumps everything. It trumps rules, regulations. You know what happens when there's a culture that doesn't like the rules and regulations? They don't follow them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
and you're right. And those cultures are the ones that actually grow things.
Yes.
They don't follow the rules, and they create their own new rules, and they create a set of rules that, I can't remember who said this. One of the keys to growing a successful business is to create a set of rules that you create, and you force people to play by your rules rather than you playing by their rules.
Yeah.
And associations oftentimes are their own demise, because people come together and say, well, we need an association to represent us in this industry. And so now they create a set of rules, and everybody that comes into the association has to play by those rules. Well, after 20, 30 years, you've got a bunch of rule followers, right? And no one's breaking the rules until someone comes along and says, hey, wait a minute here. Like, things are changing, and the rules you guys create don't work for us. So
so what's the secret of success? One of the secrets is having a rule set that can evolve with culture.
Right.
Yeah. Because if you're going to be rigid, it can only be my way. Because that's going nowhere. That's a road to hell, basically, and stress and burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got to be mature enough to let the culture evolve around and above you sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because the culture's above, below, and to the left and right of you always.
Yeah. Paying homage to luck.
Yeah.
Like that was a big part of it. And like you said, nobody was greedy. They were just, it's just a great story, beginning story, of three people coming together and wanting to change the way things are done. So he talked about that in the beginning. Again, several times he emphasized the role of good people.
Yeah.
You know that, and I know that, and we've seen that in good businesses, how important. And we've seen businesses that were good businesses that lost a lot of good people, particularly after an acquisition or a change in leadership.
Yep. That is the red flag, mate. That when people start leaving, that's when you got to ask yourself some hard questions.
Yeah, absolutely. He made, and I love this. You talked about it. He talked about it. I've talked about it. You have to learn to say no, and you have to understand there's just some people you're not going to do business with. And that is when you're a hungry business and you're starting out, that'll be one of the biggest decisions you make is when to say no.
Yeah, 100%.
Because you can find yourself, when you say yes to the wrong business opportunity, the wrong person,
and take you down.
It'll take you down.
Yeah.
It'll take you down. And so recognizing that, being careful who you do business with, willing to say no. He talked about brand. Well, you talked about the brand. That you brought that up, and he didn't use the words public relations, but he talked about relationships.
Yeah.
And I think lots of businesses fail to understand the role of public relations.
Yeah.
That is a big thing. When I think
Someone
about
explained brand to me this way: a brand is a promise.
yeah,
And it's 1,000 things in that promise that all add up to who you are as a firm, right?
yeah,
So if your brand is, so, Commtech's brand was, we put the work first, we make sure we deliver, right? Nested under that were 1,000 other things, but that was the brand. And then also associated with that brand, it was a bit exciting and they were doing exciting stuff. You put all that together, there's a little bit of magic at that point, right?
there is, and that's what the goodwill component. So for those, again, like when you get into business and then you have an exit strategy, one of the line items in your business is going to be the goodwill.
Yes.
Those people are buying the business are going to look at the mechanics of the business, the share value, your ability to sustain a profit or growth in the business. Those are all cut and dry. That's all black and white stuff. That's all going to be looking at the data. But there's something in your valuation that's the goodwill, and that is the business's ability to continue to attract clients based on your reputation and like you said, your brand, and that has value. And that value will be that's the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And that's why when someone acquires a business and they ask the key stakeholders to stay on board, it's to retain that good value until the price can be paid out. And if you've got no goodwill in your business, it's not good. You're going to struggle like crazy to ever get rid of that business.
Absolutely right. No, this is sort of like this is a business podcast hidden as a story about one firm, right?
Yep.
This episode is all about business, how to do it, how to deliver, how to be, what's important, right? That's all in this episode. I love that. I've been wanting to do one of these for a while now, actually, and Andy is been the perfect vehicle for that, I think.
Yeah, both of you guys were talking, like, one of the things I really liked also was the difference between buying and selling. And when a business is bought or a business is sold.
Yeah.
And they're not the same thing.
They are not the same thing at all. At all. People do not understand that distinction. And that's one of the first things you need to get your head around if you're starting a business. Best advice I ever got was 2 things, right? If you're not sure what to do, stand by the nearest biggest pile of money you can find, and hopefully some of it will drop on your head. And then number 2 is, if you start a business, do not start that business without a clear idea of how you're getting out of it at the end.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to check into this statistic. I'm not surprised that Andy talked about 10% of acquisitions succeed, the other 90 fail. It's high. There's no doubt about it. And I don't know if it's 10% or 20% of what the number is. I'm going to dig into that because it's I should know it. But for those, again, that are in the business of growing businesses and selling businesses, 10% failure rate, you have to ask yourself, if I'm going to buy a business, what do I need to do so I don't F it up?
So this is the dirty secret about when you see mergers and acquisitions on the TV. 89% of the time, it's about the ego of the CEO who wants to say, I bought that firm.
Yeah.
I own you now.
Yeah.
That's really what's driving that. Yes, sometimes there's strategic fit. Sometimes you're taking a competitor out, or there's a strategic fit, or there's some IP you want. But really, when it gets down to it, it's, I'm the new CEO. I've got 5 years before they probably fire me. I need to do something here.
Yeah.
What can I do? And normally they start looking at acquisitions at that point.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And as a business owner, if you're going to sell your business, understanding that there's a 9 out of 10 chance odd that the business you're going to sell is going to be gone in a couple of years, and you'll see it within the first 6 to 9 months.
And that's why I asked Andy, how did you feel? Because if you run a business for 20, 23 years, your identity is tied up with that. No question about it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? So when you do sell your business, you have to let it go. It's like you can't sell a car and tell the person who buys your car what gas to put in it, right?
Right. Yeah.
When you sell that business, it ain't yours anymore.
Yeah.
And just emotionally, you've got to move on. I know it's
Yeah.
easy to say and hard to do, but that is
Yeah.
a big thing. I'm still emotionally attached to some of the old things I've done, but you have to move on because it's not yours anymore.
Yeah, and like you said, the hard part was the people, seeing all those good people leave. And from the outside looking in, like I have empathy for the people that work for companies that get sold, because it's hard to see, because you were part of that success,
Yeah.
and you're seeing the shareholders sell or cash out, and you hear the word cash out, but you also have to remember that the risks that were taken to get that business started and to grow it needed to have a reward. And it was never the intention. Never the intention of a good business to see good people go. That's never the case. I can see how it could see how, or appear that people were used for the sake of the shareholders. That's evil, in my,
And it's more unusual than you think, actually, I think.
Yeah.
But what is also going on is a lot of owners, particularly owner-managed business, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, thanks for the money, but how will they cope without me? Because I'm the genius that runs this place, And it turns out you're not the genius you thought you were.
No, you're not. I mean, many of us could tell stories about the individuals that led the acquisition of a business and what subsequently happened to those individuals. And like you said, like within 5 years, they're gone. Well, in some cases, less than that,
Yeah.
I mean, and the company that acquired ours, that whole division, like it was
just evaporated, right?
Yeah, and it's sad, and it's because it's like you said, it's like you said, and I do it too. I think back, what if, what was missed here, because everything was right, all the reasons to bring two companies together, or a company acquiring a company. And for us, it was like, wow, if we actually sell the company, we would have access to resources that we didn't have before. We would get professional leadership in areas that we needed leadership in that we didn't have. And it was just, everything would just seem like it was good until it wasn't.
Absolutely. So look, to wrap this up then, all I would suggest to anyone thinking of starting a business, probably do it, but go into it knowing how you're getting out, and knowing it's not your technical skills that are really going to matter here. It's your managerial and leadership and sales skills that are really going to matter ultimately.
Yeah. My comments on that is that understanding the difference between leadership and management.
Two different things.
There's a lot of people who are managers who think that are in leadership positions, and it's the wrong place for them.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of people, and so there is definitely a difference between leaders and managers. Yourself, Andy, myself, we all have a vision for the things that we do. We understand the strategies and the tactics and the goals and all the things that need to go into a business plan to make that happen. But to execute that requires people who are managers who will do what you need in order to achieve the visions that you have for the business. When a business gets acquired and now a manager is put in place of growing that business, that's just going to fall flat on its face, because they no longer have the vision for why the business existed in the first place.
And also the X factor, that thirst for risk and taking a chance is not typically present in managers. That's
absolutely, you're right. They're very concerned about their existence. And so they're there to implement. Well, you know what? I mean, the visionaries, they create the gears and the managers turn them.
Here's my distinction between a manager and leader. Managers manage the known and leaders manage the unknown.
Yeah, that's very good.
Because, when you're a leader, sometimes you get in the office and you have no idea what rockets come to your desk, but you know one's coming, right? Whereas if you're a manager, it's about a process and you're managing what you know and you're keeping everything in line, right? It sounds like a fine distinction, but it's actually a very wide distinction.
It is.
And the skill set is very different between those two people. Right?
Yeah.
And Andy sort of embodies that. He's really the leader. I know he bills himself as a manager, and he's good at the process and the business management, but actually he's more of a leader than a manager, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. So that was another good one. I'm really glad we got the business one in after 5 or 6 years. We finally nailed it.
And you know what? We need to get some more stories like that one in the podcast, and when they come up, we'll get them on board. And because Andy could have talked about a whole bunch his current roles that he's doing. And
I mean, there's such a lot there. That's why I wanted to focus on just Commtech, because I know that story is a great story from beginning to end.
Yeah,
but he's done a lot of other interesting, good stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the same with a lot of our guests. They're so diverse.
Yeah.
But again, that was one of your visions of the podcast, was adjacent fields, people that
exactly,
all the adjacent stuff, and it's really powerful. So kudos to you and your leader.
So my daughter said to me, I say, why do you want to work in the built environment? She's in aerospace. And she say, well, I want to work for exciting people like Elon Musk. Who's Elon Musk of your business, right?
Yeah.
So Andy is a legit, exciting, glamorous, successful person in our business, right? Yet no one knows about him.
Yep. Yeah.
This is my point with the podcast. We've got to put people out there to inspire people. Andy's journey could be anybody's journey. I'm hoping someone listens to his story and goes, you know what? I'll have a go at that.
Yep.
That's what I want. If someone does that, I'm happy.
Yeah, totally.
All right, mate. See you on the next one.
Okay. Cheers, Adam.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. To access show notes for this episode, visit edificecomplexpodcast.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time.